Indian sitar is probably the most well-known plucked string instrument from North Indian classical music, which is the main classical music system from the northern part of India, in contrast to Carnatic or South Indian classical music, which is in the southern part of India. So my forte and my training is in the North Indian classical system, and I was lucky enough to start with my father, the late Acharya Raag Verma, who is also a sitarist, and I learned from him since I was a little boy. And 10 years later, when I was a teenager, he introduced me to one of the all-time legends of our music, a master by the name of Ustad Ali Akbar Khan. And he's considered by many to be like a Johann Sebastian Bach of our music. And he had founded a school in San Francisco in western United States, so I moved out there to learn with him and spent many, many years there, and that kind of became the focus of my musical life. And since that time I've learned with his son Alam Khan, who's also a world-renowned sarod maestro. And so both he and his father played a different instrument called the sarod, which is a fretless slide instrument. So you might say in some ways my playing has attributes both of typical traditional sitar playing, but also of this other instrument, the sarod. So my playing, my aesthetic kind of encompasses both. The instrument itself is a very interesting instrument. For one thing, the entire body of the instrument is hollow. Not only the resonator gourds, but the neck is hollow. So the sound is conducted not only by the wood itself, but also by the air vibrations that are going through it. And you can see that there's a second sound hole here in the back of the second gourd. And the gourds themselves are actually made of pumpkins. It's all organic materials, which also means that each sitar is unlike any other. They each have their own characteristic sound because you can't reproduce the exact same pumpkin in the exact same wood. So it gives them a beautiful sort of personality, each one. You'll notice the sitar also has curved frets, unlike a lot of other fretted instruments which have almost like straight frets, like guitar. So what that allows us to do is not only play all the notes of, say, the piano, up and down the scale, the chromatic scale, but we can also access all the notes between the notes, using this bending of the string. And it gives the sitar this amazingly expressive quality, almost like a voice. And we can also stretch a huge amount because of these curved frets and the positioning of the wires above them. So it gives this instrument a very dynamic ability to not only play straight notes, but also reach between them and bring out feeling by these artful ways of sliding between the notes. The sitar has a lot of strings, as you can see, 20 strings in fact, and they're grouped into three main categories. So the first category, of course, is the main melody strings, which we have on any stringed instrument. So the first one is a steel string and has the characteristic bright sound. The second string is a bronze string and it has a much warmer kind of quality. The third string has an even deeper, richer quality. And the fourth string has a growl. So across all of these strings, we're able to get a range of about 4 octaves. The second category of string is these resonant, buzzing kind of strings we call chikari. And chikari have two main purposes. The first is to create a sense of breath or space and three-dimensionality in slower passages. For instance, say I take a simple melody that has a lot of space. That's fine, nice melody. But if I add the chikari strings, it creates a richer kind of character, a depth to it. It gives it this sense of foreground and background to the music. The second use for these chikari strings is to play the faster passages, which we call jhala, rhythmic playing. So they add this really kind of scintillating, bright bite to the music. Finally, the third category of string we have is the sympathetic strings, which of course sound very nice when we strum them like this. But the main purpose of these strings is actually to add this subtle elegance to the sound of the main playing strings by playing sympathetically, meaning that these strings will actually resonate by themselves when the corresponding fret is played on the main strings. So if I take say a piece of felt and I dampen them, you can hear their effect first by when they're missing what happens. So they're not resonating now. Now if I play up the scale and I cut each note, I dampen it, you'll see that there's hardly any resonance left afterwards. Almost dead, right? Nothing happened. Now when I let these run free, listen after each note, after I cut it, what happens. So it creates this kind of shimmering afterglow, which creates part of the magical kind of quality of the sitar. It's a very difficult thing to replicate without these actual strings. And those harp strings, in fact, they actually run underneath the other strings. So you actually have two racks of strings, one on top here and one underneath that goes underneath all the frets and into the body of the instrument, because remember it's hollow, and attaching to these small tuning pegs. So that's about the strings of the sitar. Finally, I'll talk about the plucking of the sitar. The sitar has an ability to be plucked in a variety of different ways, in very sort of warm, gentle kind of tones, or very kind of thin tones, which have a very different effect. And even though we're only using a single finger pick, which we call a mizrab attached, which sits on our finger, holding on to it, we can create all kinds of very agile, tight rhythm. So this is just a little bit about the instrument. Of course, there's a lot more detail that you can get into. The music behind the notes. That's what I endeavor to do in my own playing, is not just play notes, not just play something that's, like I said, sort of mildly entertaining, but something that really brings about a sense of a deep mood, right? Something that really catches your fancy. So for instance, one of the ways I would do that is by trying out different sort of ornamentation, So say, for instance, a simple melody. In our style of music, we would decorate this, for instance, like... So it's still, basically playing the same sort of melody, but with all kinds of ornamentations and decorations.